My name is Simon Dickson, and I don't like the term co-founder because it feels very American, and that's really not who we are and what we're about. I've billed myself as the acting head of everything else at Code for the People, in that I look after the business side. I've kind of retired from coding because I became very aware over the last sort of year or two that there were people coming into the industry who were frankly just better than I was, and I'd served my time. Meeting Keith, for example, really brought that home to me. Keith and I went to the same school in Ireland. The slightly embarrassing thing is that Keith started long after I left, and yeah, it makes me feel really, really quite old. I'm going to talk to you tonight about this, which broadly speaking is where WordPress is now as an entity in the UK marketplace. I've just come back from WordCamp Europe. I've seen some familiar faces. Who was there? Two, three? Not many. It was brilliant. It was 2.5 days and several very, very long nights of WordPress chat and code hacking. And yeah, it really drove it home to me how big this thing had become, because there were 700 and something people there. The first WordCamp I ever attended, I think it was only the second one in Europe, was this one in 2008. We had it in Birmingham. This was the first ever WordCamp UK. Right in front of the screen there, in front of the centre of the picture is Mike Little. Mike, who is the guy who co-created WordPress. To my memory, Mike didn't actually tell anybody at that event who he was. And it was kind of, you're that Mike? We only found this out about 2 years later. You might be able to see on the screen there, the talk is, WordPress is not a blog. Oh boy, we've had that a few times since. I did a talk at that event, and my talk was this about corporate adoption. These are the 4 things I suggested that WordPress needed if it was going to become a big shot in the world of CMS. 2 of those I stand by. One of them has happened. One of them I kind of regret putting up there. I had this grand idea that we needed to follow the model of Ubuntu with its long-term support version. I've since been persuaded that that's not a great idea, so I kind of should probably have blacked that out actually. The one that was probably the most important was that word ecosystem there, and that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight. An ecosystem is defined as being the kind of interaction between organisms in an environment and with the environment. And I kind of think about this in terms of a marine ecosystem, so fish in a pond. You get a fish like that, that's a puffer fish. That's a small fish pretending to be a big fish. That fish is an idiot, because an ecosystem needs big fish and little fish. So in our context, big fish, little fish in an environment, agencies, freelancers, and WordPress itself. Big fish need little fish. Now I'm speaking here as the guy who runs a WordPress-specific agency. We need freelancers. We need a good stock of freelancers operating in the UK because we need extra capacity. Someone comes along with a job that we really want to take on, but we just haven't got enough manpower, person power to hand. We need freelancers. If someone's got a specific skill that we don't often need, but a particular project demands it, we need freelancers. If you want to be a big fish, if you're trying to get a company started up and you need staff, to be honest with you, it's a headache getting that first staff member employed. You bootstrap it, you need freelancers. That's all very well, but actually, the little fish need the big fish as well. Because it's the big fish who bring in the bigger projects, probably the more challenging, more interesting projects, and actually help drive the credibility of WordPress in that larger space. And interestingly enough, I think the pond needs the fish, because if you haven't got fish swimming around, you end up with stagnant water. And I think it's the fact that we've had the fish swimming around in the WordPress space that's really lifted it. The fact that we've got so many people able to just kind of get started. You don't need permission to do what you want to do. You can just get into the code, you can make what you want. This is what drives WordPress forward. So my first tip for the evening is this. Decide which one of these you are and which one you want to be. In our case, at Code for the People, it probably took us about 4 years to make that decision. Code for the People started out as myself and my co-director, Simon Wheatley. Simon's based in Manchester, I'm based in Berkshire. We meet up once every month, maybe, but we do the kind of distributed thing and it works for us. We started going out together, in a sense, in 2008, at that first WordCamp actually. And gradually, when I needed technical help on a project, I would go to him. When he needed front-end help, he would come to me. And by about 2010, it kind of became obvious that this was a relationship built to last. So I don't think I should probably have embarked on this road, but one of us proposed to the other one. I don't want to go into details to who proposed to who. But by about 2010, we decided that this needs to happen. You know, we need to formalize the relationship because we felt that clients felt it was a bit weird. You know, who were this network of freelancers? They couldn't quite get their head around it being a stable way of operating, despite the fact that we in this world feel quite comfortable with that. It didn't help that we were both called Simon, and they didn't realize why Simon from this company was emailing them, and then Simon from this company was emailing them. Roll forward about 2 years, and we finally got married. The problem for us actually was finding a name. So tip number 2, choose a name quickly and just don't obsess over it. We spent so long arguing over names. I could give you a list this long of ideas we had for names and then discarded. The lesson I've taken from that is that if you're going to try and do things in this kind of project space, give them names. We have a plugin that we've just unveiled called Babel. I think it might get a mention later on, hopefully. Multilingual plugin. We had an idea to do this years ago. It was only when we gave it a name that it took on a personality. And when something has a name, it just rolls forward. You take it more seriously than whenever it's just kind of a vague idea in the ether. And we don't do that as a matter of course. If we have a plugin that we're developing in-house that we want to release publicly, we want to make a sustainable thing, we give it a name very quickly. Try and make it a decent name, but we don't spend ages over it. And if it doesn't suit after a couple of months, do you know what? It doesn't matter. You've stopped noticing. And I think the same thing goes for company names and project names and team names and network names and all these things. It's more important to have a name than to have a perfect name. So that's certainly one thing I've picked up. Tip number 3 is this one. Wear your WordPress t-shirt with pride. That much pride. I have no idea who she is, but I want to meet her. She loves WordPress. When we started out as an agency, I was advised by a very good friend not to bill ourselves as a WordPress agency. I note with some amusement, let's say, that the same guy has a consultancy now, and on his front page, in 36-point text, we are a 100% WordPress agency. I think there's half a dozen things that we get from doing that. One of them is differentiation. And I think this applies to agencies, it also applies to freelancers as well. There are hundreds of us out there, there are thousands of us out there. And why are they going to pick you? Why is your agency, why are you as a freelancer going to be the guy that gets the gig? We felt that by specifying WordPress skills up front, and by doing it relatively early in the process, we could mark out a bit of territory for ourselves, and it has broadly worked. It also means that when people ring us up, they've already made that decision. So we don't have to explain why we feel WordPress is a good fit. They've probably already seen it, they're probably aware of it, they may even have used it. If they haven't used it, we'll tell them to go off to WordPress.com and get a free account, because they'll pick up the basics. They'll have a fair idea of what we're going to give them as the end product, and they can see if they like it or not. We're quite comfortable if they don't like it. I've got to say that doesn't happen very often. WordPress also brings with it a general goodwill. You know, there are hundreds of people coming from all over Europe to go to a WordCamp. You look up any article about what is the best CMS in 2013, you're always going to see good stuff about WordPress. It may not come out as the best in any particular survey, but you're going to struggle to find many people with bad things to say about it. So why wouldn't you piggyback on that? Why wouldn't you want to be part of that team that makes WordPress? I think it also helps that it sets people's expectations when they do get in touch with us, because if they know we are kind of WordPress people, they know we're fairly relaxed. We're not going to deliver them 200-page RFP responses. We're not going to demand, board meetings every 3 minutes. They get a good sense of who we're going to be. It also makes us work a bit harder. It makes us think longer term. If we're going to do WordPress for the next 3 years, who knows longer, it's worth going to that extra trouble of making a plugin reusable, of getting your development environment just right. If you're dabbling in WordPress and dabbling in Drupal and dabbling in Joomla and whatever else you do, you haven't got the motivation to do that. But we felt that it was really worthwhile to tie ourselves down to that and make sure that we did things right. Here's tip number 4. There's 8 tips, by the way. Tip number 4 is establish your credibility. Now, as Keith very kindly said, the way we've chosen to do that is by being part of this thing, the WordPress.com VIP Featured Partner Program. There are 10 agencies in the world who have this status. You'll note, by the way, that the list is in alphabetical order, so there's not a mini tip. If you're going to choose a name, make sure you choose one of the kind of top end of the alphabet. If anyone starts a consultancy called Aardvark Consulting, I will know who it was and I will find you. It's a very US-centric thing, because inevitably WordPress.com Automatic is a US-centric operation. It's meant to deliver us introductions, sales leads effectively. By and large, when we get those, they're US-centric. If they're East Coast, that's fine, because we've got sort of all afternoon to talk to them. If they're West Coast, we've got about a 20-minute window at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They don't want to talk to us at that time of day. We don't want to talk to them at that time of day. So we find the West Coast hard work, but the East Coast actually is all right. The problem we find with this is it isn't particularly European-centric, and it's not really getting an awful lot of traction within Europe. But what we find is that by being on that list, people in Europe find us, and it gives us that little boost of credibility. We're getting offers of work from people that would scare you. Certain projects that we've been offered just intimidate me as to how big they could end up. I'd rather we did it than anyone else, but this is the level that WordPress is getting to, and it's by being on lists like this that you get yourself in that marketplace. That option isn't open to everybody. We kind of had to prove our commitment to the cause and put cash down and all kinds of things. So what can you do to get on those kinds of lists? Well, the first one is just kind of come along and speak at events. We've got WordCamp London coming up next month. We've got Keith's Fine Efforts here every month-ish. Come along, tell the world what you're doing. The biggest problem we have is finding good people in the UK who are doing good, interesting things. The Americans are much better at doing that than we are. How can you get word out? Come along and talk. Write for a blog. Might be your own blog, might be someone else's. There's plenty of WordPress-centric websites now that are crying out for content. There's so many of them, there just isn't enough content to go around. Your WP Taverns, your talks, post status. We've seen the back of WP Candy. We've seen, I can't even remember, what was the last one that went bust spectacularly? The one that John Sally's been, I can't remember what it was called. If there isn't a blog covering your niche in WordPress, feel free to start one. It's worth pointing out that people like Brian Krogstad, who runs Post Status, has just been hired by one of our fellow featured partner agencies. He gets his name on that list and establishes his credibility, so he gets WordPress and gets the culture around it. Yeah, shout about your work. Tell us what you've done. I find it very hard to find good case studies of what's going on in the UK that aren't being done by us or a very select band of people. And it comes as a real shock sometimes to discover that somebody's done a great piece of work on WordPress. Tell the world, this is how these things are going to move forward. If you can produce an awesome plugin, and I mean awesome, then that's another good way. The world does not need another slideshow plugin, another homepage slider. But the world does need certain things in the WordPress space. I mentioned, for example, we have a plugin called Babel. This is our attempt at fixing the gap for multilingual, which again, this is going to talk about in a moment. We felt we were in a position to do it right. We had enough knowledge, we had enough contacts, we felt we could get the job done. And we're hoping that that will help people find us and give us work in that kind of space. We're not going to charge for it, we're going to leave it open source, that's fine, but it gets credibility into Google, frankly. And finally this one, get your name on the credits list. There are 17 million WordPress sites out there, something like that. And every one of those has got a credits page with a list, every release with about 100, 150 names on it. At Code for the People, we take a real priority in making sure that everybody on the team can get their name on that list. And how do you do that? You wait into track. You get your name on a patch, you report a bug, you fix a typo. It can be as little as that, as long as you trigger that little search mechanism that goes at release day to see who's pitched into that release of WordPress. Start small, and who knows, maybe you can move on and get to be one of the half dozen core contributors, core lead team. But get started. I can guarantee you that people look at that list and then go on to contact the people they find on that list. We do every time. You only get to the stage where you can say, I'm the guy who. I'm the guy who did that plugin. I'm the guy who built that site. What you don't want to be is that. Now, there are two reasons why you don't want to be that. You don't get to call yourself an expert. We call you an expert because you've proven yourself. You tell us what you've done, and then we will bestow expert status upon you. The other thing, frankly, capital P down here. Please, if you're going to write WordPress, please spell it right. It makes me really angry. Almost that angry. But the lesson I want to take from Malcolm Tucker is not that that's a good way to get things done. It's that you need to be prepared to spin things a little. Now, this is going to be a controversial point, I accept that. But there were a lot of stock responses that you get when you suggest WordPress might be the solution to a problem. And I want to run through how we deal with them and how we try and turn them around. So, here's the first one. I thought WordPress was just a blogging platform. There are not two answers to that question. There's that one. Don't blame us, blame Ghost. They're the ones now who are just a blogging platform. We'll see. We'll see. Not when you're talking about serving newspapers, you're not. My reaction to that is that yes, WordPress is still at heart just a blogging platform, and that's why it's great in the corporate context. Because so many websites, and I'm sure you've all seen this, so many websites boil down to one person running the show. You might have a marketing team, you might have an IT department, you might have a press office, you might have a product support team. All these people are supposedly meant to be bought into the website. But in reality, it comes down to that one person, the webmaster, or whatever they're called these days. Why wouldn't you use a platform that was optimized for one person to run on their own? Yeah, sure, in the old days we called that a blog, but that's where it came from, and that's why people want to, if they can get stuff done without having to go and bother the sysadmin, the press officer, the marketing executive. There's another question we don't like fielding. What's your hosting SLA? Which also translates it, how late can I phone you at the weekend? We sidestep that completely, and here's how we do it. We say we don't provide hosting. We just don't do it. Now we're cutting off a revenue stream there, and maybe that's a silly mistake we'll regret in the future. But what we say to people is, if you want hosting for your website, of course you need it. We'll recommend who you speak to, but you can track with them directly. Now, A, that buys us out of the 3 a.m. phone calls, which is not a bad thing. But the positive on that is that it means if you decide that you don't like us as an agency, if you want to take your business somewhere else, we can't hold you hostage. You own the hosting, you've got the password, and yeah, we accept that. That's the rules of the game. So in fact, you're giving people maybe a good reason to do business with you, but certainly you're taking away a reason not to do business with you. You can't hold them hostage. And a lot of clients get concerned about that. They've had their fingers burned in the past. So we say on our code is GPL, so you're free to take it away, that's absolutely fine by us. And you have the keys. And if you decide that someone's better served to serve you, that's fine. We'll take that. Third one, you're just a tiny operation. We're not a big team. We've got probably a team of 8 to 10 people by the time you count the regular freelancers we use. In corporate terms, in Drupal terms, that's not a big operation. But having been to WordCamp Europe, I can say to you that there are hundreds, there are thousands of people who work for us. Andy Mason works for us. Mark Jaquith works for us. Doesn't actually work for us. We don't pay his salary, we don't pay his pension, we don't pay his sick leave, we don't pay his health cover, whatever the Americans do. But we're all contributing to the same thing. So you know what? You can get an awful lot done with a very, very small team. And that is the whole beauty of WordPress and why we are where we are and why we do what we do. Number 7, be patient. Because you feel like you can get anything done in a WordPress space, as you move to larger clients and larger projects, it's easy to get frustrated. Businesses take time to make decisions. Big businesses take big time to make decisions. And whereas it used to be great that you could talk to the one individual you were dealing with and maybe contracted with, and you could turn things around in a couple of weeks, as the projects get bigger, and as you develop your experience, you kind of owe it to yourself and you owe it to the community to do those bigger projects, you've just got to wait that little bit longer. One thing we do is we try and force the issue. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When we issue a proposal, we also put a sell-by date on it, usually 2 weeks. And we'll say to people, if you're going to accept this project, you've got 2 weeks to do it. I don't think we've ever yet sliced down a guillotine at exactly 14 days, 0 hours, 0 minutes. But it's just that little bit of wiggle room that we can say to people, come on, let's make a decision. We have had our fingers burned in the past when we put proposals onto people and we sat on them for 6, nearly 9 months, and then said, yes, when will it be ready? Well, it doesn't work like that. If you'd said 6 months ago, we'd been ready in a fortnight. But we can't just sort of drop everything now, not least with the rate to go up. But yeah, I find this a little difficult. I still long for those days when it could be faster and easier. The reality though is this, and this is a quote from Matt Mulway, I believe it was from Leiden, but it may not be. WordPress doesn't come in from the top. WordPress is not made as a decision at executive level and then forced on the organization like that. It comes in from the bottom. And there are so many stories about small projects, one-offs, microsites, satellite sites, that were built on WordPress and persuaded people that this was a good way to go. So even if the client isn't bringing a big picture to you, it's always worth you bringing a big picture to them. And one piece of practical advice, if you're ever installing WordPress for a client, do it in multi-site. Give them multi-site from day one. Now they may not use multi-site mode, but whenever they do come to you and say that they want a second site, this is where you pull that rabbit out of the hat and you say, aha, yes, when do you want it? Tomorrow? No problem. Extra cost? 0. Because it's no extra effort to you doing it. 30 seconds extra effort. And it's no extra cost. So why wouldn't you do that? If you think long term, it will often pay off. You'll simply regret it if it comes to that you do need that second site ready and you didn't do it in multi-site. So that's my strong advice. Do it, and in time it will pay off. I heard a great story about a guy who worked for a New York company called eMusic. Went in there and in 24 hours produced a prototype demoing how their current website could be run on WordPress. 24 hours. I'm sure it wasn't feature complete. It's quite achievement if it was feature complete. But that guy's now working for the New York Times, the Washington Post, can't remember. But moving forward and taking on those bigger jobs, those bigger projects. Go in at the right angle, go in with the right expectations, and we can get things done. Which kind of leads me to the final point I want to leave you with, which is this. Remember why you came into WordPress in the first place. It's very easy if you've been in this field now for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. In my case, probably 2007 was my first experience with WordPress. I remember the buzz I felt that I could just get things done. I knew that there was a framework around here that gave me the stuff I didn't know. I didn't understand about databases. I didn't know enough to design one. But somebody else that knew more than I did had done it. And that enabled me to get done what I wanted to get done. And sites, instead of taking months and taking hundreds of thousands of pounds, could come together in a couple of weeks for relatively pocket money prices. That, I think, is still something that WordPress represents, and that, to me, encapsulates the enthusiasm that we have as a community. And if you come along to WordCamp London, you can see that in the room. Certainly we saw it at WordCamp Europe. There is still a buzz about WordPress. We're still special, we're still different. We are not a Drupal. Now, the Drupal world is going in a very different direction. If you want to go to the big European Drupal conference, it was midweek, not on a weekend, and I think the tickets were €400 and up. So for a weekend in London at 25 quid a pop, that's the difference. You could argue that maybe we should be growing up a little bit more. Arguably, WordPress is growing up around it, and maybe we should be growing up and being a little bit more corporate, mature. Maybe we should come along in suits. I don't know. I do know. I bought into this because of the energy and the enthusiasm. If you ask people what the difference is about WordPress, they say it's the community. That means us. So yes, WordPress is growing up. Yes, the opportunities are increasing. But remember why we're here. And that's where I'm leaving. Keith, I think you offered I would take questions there on my behalf.
Do you want to take any questions?
Does anybody want to ask anything?
Have any questions?
There's one at the back. You. Sounds like question time. A gentleman in the blue shirt.
The question about corporate actually, I mean, do you actually really believe that they actually care whether it's WordPress or not? Or from my own view, that most of them are interested in making more money and they care less about the technology behind it. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I can see that, but that's why we sidestep that argument. I think when people come to us, it's because they've already considered that, they've seen the pros and cons, and they've decided that there is something in it. It makes the sales process a lot faster, a lot easier, but it also means that we're getting people that we can deal with. We don't have that many difficult clients because they kind of know in advance what they're going to get from us. I think there are benefits to the WordPress model. I think generally we come in faster, lower cost, easier to iterate, more innovative. There's certainly more choice in terms of the various methods you could apply to do what you need to do. I think we've got a very, very strong case. If we had to go on a pure head-to-head, I think the WordPress case stands up against anyone's. But it's the fact that it's got the extra bit that I think marks it out. So yes, by all means, look at your site cores, your type of 3s, your vignettes, your Drupals, your Joomlas, all these guys trying to be that little bit more corporate. I think what marks WordPress out is different is the fact that we don't try so much to play that game. And yeah, do you know what? If that results in a cheaper figure through development, maybe that's all they care about. Maybe it is. But you know what? We often find that whenever they've seen the results, they've seen how you work, they've seen how it works, they get it. They gradually get it. Don't try and evangelize too hard. Don't try and sell it purely on that basis because it won't work. But be prepared for that conversation because it will come when they want to appreciate what is this thing? Why is this thing working like this?
Do you ever get any concerns about security in the whole work?
We don't have that conversation very often these days. I think people have got used to the idea that everything is insecure at some level. It's been a very long time since WordPress had anything in itself that was insecure. I mean, yes, you get vulnerabilities in plugins, yes, you find hosts that are easily broken into, and these things happen. But to be honest with you, more often we're asked about the hosts that we recommend. Who are we suggesting and what is their track record? How do they handle security? How do they handle capacity issues? I would almost say that that's a dead issue. People don't have the concerns that they certainly used to about WordPress and security. It's a very long time since I remember a serious WordPress security crisis. But I can think of one or two plugins, major plugins, that have fallen foul of something. You've got to be a little bit more careful about how you choose your plugins, basically, and apply the same kind of standards there that you would to your choice of CMS. Make sure it's someone you trust. Look at the code, look at their track record, see how often they update. There's all sorts of ways to assess what a decent plugin is. You are only as safe as your weakest plugin. That's a fact. So take it seriously, but I don't think it has undermined the strength of case for WordPress. Not in my experience anyway. Okay.
Do you ever touch projects where the client has a host that you don't recommend?
We have had to. It's not quite as bad as you fear it's going to be. Again, I think because we tend to pitch ourselves at that slightly higher level, if they do come with a host that we aren't familiar with or that maybe we don't feel comfortable with, they're all right. You know, we don't get people coming along with their 10 quid a year hosting deal, expecting us to run a million page views a day kind of site. They're not that stupid. We've fairly fixed ideas about who we want to recommend as hosts. There's probably any time that we get a project, we'll put 2 or 3 names in front of people. We've done enough of this now to know who's good at what. And there's plenty of choice now. You can have your vanilla hosting, you can have your Amazon-based thing, you can go for one of the tailored services like a WP Engine or something. And they've all got the strong points. They've all got the varying price points as well. Hosting's not as big a problem as it used to be. But yeah, I think if you package yourself right, you don't have that conversation very often.
Just a question. You go to your WordPress. Have you ever a situation where clients come to you with quite a particular project and realise that you thought, I don't think WordPress is the right solution for you?
Yes, we have.
Can you give an example?
It's been a while, to be honest. But yeah, we have had several instances. I think the more that people lay the complexity on top of it and have a very fixed view of how it's going to work, that's the point where we sort of feel that there's an argument looming if we're not careful. If you want to make WordPress do something, you've got to kind of follow its way of doing it. And usually that's okay. But sometimes if someone's very prescriptive about what they want, and exactly how it's got to be, and exactly how the workflow's got to work, and exactly how the data model sits, it can get tricky. But with development of things like advanced custom fields, for example, that gets you out of jail an awful lot. The WordPress model of posts and post meta, of taxonomy and term, actually stands up really, really well. It's so basic that you can often layer everything on top of it relatively quickly. I'm sure there are cleaner ways to do it. There are more sophisticated ways to do it. I know people will often condemn WordPress for being too simplistic, but it gets the job done. And it gets the job done very, very quickly and efficiently, and you can move on to doing the more interesting, fun stuff on top of it to make it work well. I don't think we've had too many in the recent past where it's been a challenge to see how WordPress would do it. And there's so much scope now in terms of plugins, in terms of scaling questions, in terms of BuddyPress coming along, ePress even. I think if someone wants a full-on, all singing, all dancing community site, then that's what Drupal was really built for. And yeah, maybe that's the one thing that we would recommend that people shy away from WordPress, because it's just that little bit more difficult. But it is improving all the time, and I don't think it's as big a challenge now as it was a year, 2 years ago.
If the client came to you wanting an e-commerce site with a few hundred products, would you build that in WordPress, or would you suggest something like Magento or something else? Well, how do you think WordPress is progressing in terms of an e-commerce site?
Well, certainly in terms of WooCommerce, which is far away the market leader. I mean, those guys know that they're onto something big.
Have you built one for a client yet?
Sorry?
Do you use WooCommerce for a client yet?
I have, yeah.
Does it work pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually remarkably easy to get something off the ground.
In terms of caching and speed and whatnot, is it fast enough?
It's fast enough, it's often not the problem. I mean, if you've got caching issues, you can probably address them in other ways.
WordPress is much matured into an e-commerce site.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, Woo Things as a company is becoming more and more focused on WooCommerce. They've got staff of, 30 people. And I think they spend the majority of their time doing support for WooCommerce because people appreciate the fact you can have a business up and running in an evening. It can be done. I know because I've done it. It wasn't the prettiest site I've ever built, but as a kind of a case study, it's there. Hooking into payment providers and things is where it gets a little bit awkward. If you want to get the interface looking just right, it can be a bit of a pain. Setup takes longer than you would probably want by the time you load all the products in and specify all the variations. I think you probably get that with any e-commerce platform. It just takes time to get all the data in there. But, it's as solid as any. I certainly, if it was your sole reason for your business existing, if you were of a certain size, then yeah, you might want to think twice, but certainly my experience with WooCommerce has been perfectly acceptable. Are we done?
Yeah.
I think we're done.